everyone, and welcome with a new episode of TechTalk Dudes. And glad that we are back again for a new episode. And Pim, today we are talking about the identity. It's your turn now. Next time we will discussing security side of the house, but I heard some new announcements in regards to provisioning and more specific about recent announcement of Entra API-driven provisioning. Quite interested what it is, and can you explain a little bit more about API provisioning?
Of course. First of all, of course, good to be here with you again, and thanks for watching to our YouTube channel. And yeah, indeed, I can comment on the new inbound provisioning API, which has been released by Microsoft. I think it was actually released on the 14th of July because it was around my birthday, but it has been announced on the 23rd of August in public on the tech community sites. And it's an to keep it a little bit short, because I can talk for hours about this topic. It's actually one of the biggest things which was missing when we talk about Entra ID and digitalized identities, because you can of course create just a regular account in Entra ID and prepare it yourself with some attributes and all those kind of things. But when we talk about identity governance, we of course want to have that process governed, and with that connected to the HR system of your company, so that HR becomes simply the source of truth for the digital identities which do reside within your Entra ID, also known previously as Azure ID for the ones who have missed the renaming. And with the inbound provisioning API, we can now do that for any kind of HR source. So it doesn't really matter what kind of HR system you use, because any kind of system is simply supported, even the ones which can only generate CSV files. So that's great, because when we look in the past, we only had Workday and SAP SuccessFactors for where this was possible. So this is opening a lot of doors for basically each organization not using SAP SuccessFactors or Workday to get that joiner and leaver process configured correctly within their environment. And eventually would be my recommendation to use lifecycle workflows on top of this feature, because they go hand in hand with each other. The inbound provisioning API will deal with the creation of the user accounts. And the lifecycle workflows will make sure that the account will be enabled in time, things will happen, added to groups, etc. And at the end, of course, the account will be deleted. So that's simply.
You're saying about creation. I'm assuming that it's also updating the objects if there are any changes.
Yeah, good point. Yes, indeed. During the lifetime of the object, it will do updates. So if in HR, someone in HR changes your department. Sorry?
You got promoted, so you're now becoming the CTO of Innspark, and then it's automatically also updated through the systems by this API provisioning.
Correct. If that would be the case, indeed, then yes, correct. I'm not sure if I have that ambition though, but it does. That doesn't really matter.
Story.
Doesn't really matter. And I can also, if you want to have a look at it, I can show this very quickly in practice. How you could set things up yourself. And the beauty of it basically is simply is that Microsoft is providing you some really great examples actually. So what we're in right now is the lab environment for the company I work with. Why? Because personally, in my personal life, I don't have my kids in an HR system, and my girlfriend's not in there. So I needed an.
No, they're not on your payroll.
No, they use my payroll, but but basically, This is the labs environment, and within this labs environment, I connected the labs environment to the HR system so that it can easily provision identities who need to work for this for company within our labs environment, and make sure that those are provisioned in time, get the right rights, and of course be decommissioned in time. Now, if you go to what we have built is actually it's simply a logic app which will handle most of the magic. And quickly going over the steps what we are doing here. Let me zoom in a bit, because otherwise it's something you cannot see if you see that digitally. Why is this not working? Because I'm using the wrong button, I think. Okay. It's running each hour. Here we initialize actually the provisioning API endpoint variable. I will come back to that in a minute, where you can retrieve this particular value for yourself. Then I'm retrieving the key, how I can connect to the in this case AFAS API.
Yeah.
Now with that key I can connect, retrieve all the user details from the company, parse that information, because I want to know sure that, for example, my last name and my given name and maybe some other values like hire date and leave date are always there when I get the output back. So if I would walk through the provisioning process and things are suddenly empty, it would stop right here. Now, sometimes information is missing from HR because it simply doesn't, it's not within HR.
Yeah.
And so we created some storage tables on a storage account in Azure to enhance the data. And basically all those three things which you see right here, we throw that through a runbook on Azure Automation. Now, if we are going to look at the runbook then in Azure Automation, which is this one, I can already see that I'm indeed receiving those three variables as a parameter, and then within the script, and this script can be downloaded from the learn pages, at least rule 10 till 705, because that's basically what you get by default. I'm still hoping that this at some point in time will be just a module which you can import, but this is how it's just given into public preview. So this is what you need in terms of functions. And then there is an attribute mapping, which basically explains to you of basically you can build this so that you can validate at the later within the runbook if the schema which you have built, if that's matching your attribute mapping, because it's all based on scheme. And within here, you can build all sorts of magic, like combine define your last name, because in the Dutch world, we also have, I don't know what the word is in English actually, but something which is between your given name and your last name. And normally we would combine that so that it's, in this case, like you, Ronnie, with De Jong, that would be combined in here. So you can give this some logical, how do you say it?
You're actually normalizing and
exactly
transforming the data, the data which is coming from HR, and making sure that the input is validated and you have good output which can be used to process.
Exactly like that. And at the end of this workbook, we're creating the scheme bulk payloads, and we are putting them on a storage account. And from the storage account, in this case, you will see 5 JSON files, which will have the details posted as a scheme request. And in here you can, for example, see phone numbers, UPNs, job titles, those kind of things, but more importantly, also the hire date and the leave date, if leave date is of course applicable. For me, that isn't. Address, manager, department, and all those kind of things. So this is actually the output of the runbook, and from the output we can gather that information again back into the Logic app and send that over to the provisioning API. Now, if we then look at the provisioning API itself, well, in simple words, it's nothing more and nothing less than an enterprise application. And if you search for API driven in the Entra portal, you will see two of them. So I can provision to Azure AD, Entra ID, and I can provision to Active Directory. You can add those apps yourself into your environment. Of course, I already did. So if I here look for, that's not new, of course, because it's already existing. In this case, we have two, because some accounts go directly into Azure, straight into Entra ID, and some are going to Active Directory.
Yeah.
Now, I will pick the ones which I think for 90% of the companies do apply, which is Entra ID, Active Directory in this case, so hybrid accounts. And once you then go to provisioning, the provisioning tab of the enterprise application, you go to provisioning, you can select your Active Directory domain. This is all based on your Cloud Sync agent. So if your Cloud Sync agent is, if that's installed within this particular domain, your domain will pop up here. And you can define a default or for new users. And then within the mappings file, once you have done this, you can go to the mappings file and you can here see, okay, the source, the API attributes, those are the ones which are linked to the data which you just saw as a JSON file, are then linked to an on-premise Active Directory attribute. Like, for example, your display name goes into your CN, common name value, in on-premise AD.
Hey, Pim, just one question. You mentioned when you're using your Cloud Sync agent, then it will automatically populate it. If you use the older one, the Connect agent, is that also working the same, or is that something to consider?
So if you're using Azure AD Connect, you need to install the Cloud Sync agent besides it.
Okay.
So that the Cloud Sync agent will create those identities in your Active Directory domain. And then Azure AD Connect, if that's your desired scenario, you can send them over then to Entra ID back as a hybrid.
Exactly.
And create a hybrid identity. So they're coming in from HR via Cloud Sync to Active Directory, and then from Active Directory they're synchronized with Azure AD Connect to Entra ID.
Yeah.
So that's definitely possible. And I think what's also good to know is sometimes people are going to marry. People are I hope not for you, but can divorce as well. And that means that HR is going to change your last name in this case. And if your last name changes, you don't want to have that happening randomly within your environment when HR has time to do that, or sometimes it's an urgent matter. So for usernames and other important values, you can, for example, say, apply this mapping only when the object is created. So meaning updates don't apply. So if your last name is updated in the HR system, your last name will be updated in Entra ID or Active Directory, but it won't have any impact on your username.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's actually a cool feature, because then you're actually flagging it like a read-only attribute, more or less, from a display perspective.
Yeah, except for the first time of provisioning, of course, because then it's doing its job. Now, something else which is interesting, I think, to know is that it's always logged. So what we can do is, and let's go back for I think a month or so, because it's already running for a while in this environment. We can here, for example, see there is an update applied on the 11th of August on the source ID, and then it's the employee number. And we can also see which attributes have been modified. And in this case, it was, I think, because I don't know who this actually is. I think this is a new employee who started on the 1st of August within the department compliance in this case. If I want to look who this is, I can of course search for this employee number within Entra ID, but I'm not going to do that because I will probably find one of my colleagues, and I'm not sure if they're very happy to to be on this video. So I'll leave that as
your privacy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically the setup. And the beauty of this is, with this, it's of course provisioning the employee hire date and leave date time, which makes it also easy to step up to using lifecycle workflows. And I think we've talked about that earlier. In another video. But that's why I said on the start of this recording that those features go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, it's actually completing the end-to-end, connecting the dots of the entire identity, government, and lifecycle. You mentioned the joiner, mover, leaver. There were lifecycle workflows might be interesting to assigning applications, profiles, etc. This is actually the start of the process where the source of truth from your HR systems are connected to that process. So yeah.
Exactly. It's quite critical, also from a leaver perspective, because IT doesn't know when that person leaves. The person itself wants to have his account on time. Yeah. The manager wants to have as less as steps in between the creation. He wants a fluid onboarding of his new employee. So there are a lot of involved parties in here, and for all parties there are only advantages because it's just motivating.
You're streamlining the entire process. You're removing the labor, removing the chance of errors. It's improving the quality of the data with the normalization you showed us. So making sure that you set up this in the right manner and maintaining it, and then you can have a coffee and everything will happen automatically almost.
Exactly. And I think one last important thing to mention from my side, because I showed you, I think maybe at least if you want to type it over, it's quite complex because you don't know all the details. But the docs describe a few great examples. With Azure Logic Apps, with PowerShell, with Graph Explorer, with Postman. So use those examples. That's the tip I think I can give you to use those examples to build, to start building things for your own. That's, I think, important to mention. And in terms of security, what's important to mention is that there is a separate permission created for this within the graph. So only global administrators can use those, can use the provisioning API endpoint within a post request, or you need to have specifically the synchronization upload permission applied to your managed identity, for example, or to your service principal if you want to use any. So those are the two important things to mention, because and make sure those are protected in the right state, because if a hacker can get access to that account, a global administrator account, or that kind of permission, is that attacker could inject literally accounts into your environment. So at least be sure that you protect it correctly. So those are the two things I can give you as a quick tip.
Well, thanks for sharing your perspectives and insights on this great topic about API provisioning, Pim. Well, thank you very much. I heard it, but I didn't know exactly what it entails, and with this with your explanation, it's at least clear to me. So I'm assuming it will also clear to our audience. So with that, Pim, thank you very much for sharing this great new feature. And it's ending our tech talk, I would say. And thanks again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And looking forward to the next episode where we are talking about security. Looking forward already to it, Pim.
That's more your cup of tea, indeed. Yeah, no, thanks for being here again with me. Connect your HR system to Entra ID. So that's start using the feature because it's there for you, and it improves also the security posture. Looking forward to our next talk, Ronnie, and talk to you soon.